Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the first episode of the story where Madara devised a plan. The Yondaime ruined things. Madara devised another plan. One that could never fail. But even the best laid plans of mice and men can go awry, and this one had just run into Konoha's most surprising ninja, Uzumaki Naruto. This story is from Arun 2110. Please support him, her. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Sitting by his bedside, Sakura stared at the sleeping form of her teammate. In the last few days, as Team 7 recuperated from their wounds, they had learned a lot about themselves. That learning paled in comparison to the knowledge they had gained about Naruto, however. It boggled her mind to think that the boy bore the essence of such a thing as the Kyuubi and had been unaware of it for all his life save the last few days. How powerful the Yondaime must have been to defeat the demon fox, and how skilled he must have been at the art of sealing to build a prison to imprison it for so long without even the jailer being aware of the fact. "We have a Jinchuriki for a teammate," Sasuke commented from behind her, breaking the silence. Sakura turned to regard her fellow genin. "Don't say that," she told him. "He's your friend." Sasuke shot Sakura a stare in return that made her feel like an idiot. "I never said he wasn't, Pinky. Question is, do you?" Sakura glared back. "You protected me as I lay dying. As did Naruto. You think I care he houses a demon within him? I would overlook any flaw in his character and in yours for what you two did." "True," the Uchiha accepted, drawing a chair to sit beside her. He felt the same way himself, to tell the truth. Whatever his feelings may have been 3 months before, now he would do the same for his teammates. "He almost died," Sakura said after a long silence. She reached with her hand and ran her fingers through the blonde's locks. "We all did," Sasuke replied. "He just came closer to death than the two of us." When Naruto crashed into the tree from the force of Kakashi's last punch, he'd banged his head against a dried-up branch's stump. After the exercise, while the medics were doing triage, they found a partially healed hole in the back of his head. Without the Kyuubi's healing powers, Kakashi had explained to the day before, Naruto would have died instantly from the wound. "Thank God he didn't die," Sakura said aloud. Sasuke nodded and turned his attention back to the peacefully sleeping blonde. He had things to say but wanted Naruto to be awake when he said them. "You look like you have something on your mind." "Huh?" Sasuke replied eloquently, having been lost in his own thoughts. "What did you say?" "You look like you have something on your mind." "Yes. There are things that I want to tell you too." "I'm waiting for him to wake up." "Well, why didn't you say so?" Sakura asked, seizing the blonde by his shoulders and shaking him. The jerks recovered. "He's just too lazy to get out of bed and face the world." "Hey, Naruto, wake up. Yuke wants to say something." Sasuke glared at his teammate for bastardizing his name so. "Pinky, what did you call me?" "Huh?" Sakura paused, trying to remember the words that had flowed out of her lips. A smile blossomed on her face when she did. "You got a nice name, Yuke." "Naruto, wake up." Sasuke glared at her some more, but Sakura did not mind it. If he called her Pinky, he was by God Yuke. Naruto woke up at that moment. What, Sakura?" he yawned, sitting up. "Yuke wants to talk to us," Sakura replied, grinning broadly at Sasuke. "Fuck you, Pinky," Sasuke replied. There was once a time when the very thought of doing it with Sasuke would have sent her into blissful oblivion, but now, after all that had happened and all they'd done together, Sakura did not even blink an eye. "Definitely not in Yuke like you, Yuke," she retaliated, her grin widening further. To Naruto, she said, "Are you his Same?" Naruto, having caught on to the game, looked Sasuke up and down. "What say, Yuke? Want a ride?" Sasuke gritted his teeth and glared at his two teammates. Seeing the beatific smiles they shot at him, he took a deep breath. This wasn't the end of it, but right now, he had more important things on his plate. I refuse to get distracted by this, he muttered aloud. His fists clenched as he spoke, a sure sign of his solidifying resolve. Through sheer force of will and a blind trust in his team born from the trials and tribulations of the last few months, he did what he had never done before. He bared his soul for the first time since the massacre. The man I want to kill is my brother. I want to kill him because he murdered my whole clan in cold blood. A pause. There, I said it. Naruto nodded. I knew already. Old man Tsuchi told me. And, Sakura blushed as she said this, I learned from my aunt after our first exercise together. I was curious about the state of the Uchiha compound and wanted to find out why. I'm ashamed I never knew and never cared to find out before. Sasuke ignored the carefully phrased apology and cast his eyes to the world outside the window. The Uchiha clan was the most powerful combat clan in Konoha. We had an unrivaled record of service to the village earned by right of blood in battle. We had honor. We had respect. We were as much symbols of the village as the Hokages. We had everything. I had everything. And then, in one night, my brother took it all away. He slaughtered the whole clan by himself. He killed my parents, my relatives. He killed every soul I ever knew in cold blood and made me relive their murders over and over again in my head, Sasuke confessed with a choke as he fought tears. The Uchiha are a forgotten footnote in history because he stole our honor. No one remembers us because we are the weak clan wiped out in a single night by a rogue. Our destruction is so shameful the academy books don't even talk about it. Sasuke trailed off, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. I will kill my brother. Because he stole my parents. Because he stole my clan. Because he stole our honor. Because he stole my sanity. Because he's a feckless kinslayer and deserves to be put down like the rabid dog he is. Sasuke. Sakura began, laying a comforting hand on his shoulder. Don't say anything, Sasuke replied. After all we've been through, I just wanted you to know. Just so, we're with you, Sasuke, Naruto said in a solemn voice. I know, the last Uchiha replied, knowing they meant it and taking comfort in their support. The next morning, as Team 7 was getting ready to be discharged, Kakashi visited them. I see you're all healthy, he said as he walked into the room. No thanks to you, Sakura muttered. The bastard had visited Team 7 but once in the 3 days they were laid up in the hospital and then only to narrate Naruto's story. After nearly killing them for the sake of a stupid exercise. He must have a lot of nerve to act as if nothing had happened and everything was okay. Kakashi ignored the comment even though he heard it. If he acknowledged Sakura's words, he was constrained by law to act in certain ways. Ways that were unpleasant and would all but destroy the team he had worked so hard to build. It wasn't as if Team 7's resentment was unwarranted, anyways. They were bound to resent him for the things he did and he did not begrudge them their hatred. For now, he could live with their bitterness so long as they did their jobs. His team was smart enough that they'll learn the wisdom of his training at the first whiff of reality outside the walls and forgive him. Or at least, he hoped they would pardon him. There was always the possibility that his actions had destroyed any bridges between Team 7 and himself. Being smart enough to realize the wisdom of his teachings did not mean they would do the rational thing and let him off the hook, after all. However, there was a more immediate problem to consider. If he stayed with Team 7 too long with their minds not focused on any mission, there was a chance they might give vent their anger at him. Not a good thing at all. We have an escort mission to protect a citizen of Wave Country. We're supposed to leave today, but the client's drunk. I've used it as an excuse to delay things for a day. Meet me at the Eastern Travelers Gate at 9 a.m. sharp. Pack for a 10-day mission. The mission. Sakura began, but Kakashi had already shined out. Tazuna, the bridge builder, was a bastard. Not as much of one as Kakashi, Team 7 universally decided, but then, their teacher was neither a drunk nor nearly as annoying as their client. The Jounin observed the discussion using battle language between his students with wry amusement, but since Tazuna had no idea what the innocent little brats were calling him, he let it be. He even got a few chuckles out of the deal as Naruto and Sasuke discussed in quite vivid detail the bridge builder's supposed preference for the company of goats to fulfill his physical needs. Indeed, the boys were developing some very dirty mouths. The mission continued in that vein, with Team 7 keeping away from Kakashi but generally enjoying themselves. All said and done, the crank was a walk in the park and as gay as one, until the Jounin spotted a puddle in the middle of the beaten road. It was odd, especially since it hadn't rained for the last few days and Kakashi readied himself for battle. He did nothing to warn his wards, however. He would not always be there, watching their backs. It was better they walk unsuspectingly into a trap now when he was there with them than someday in the future when he wasn't. Surprisingly, Sakura spotted the puddle as well. She straightened for a second as she came to it, but managed to recover adroitly without doing anything stupid. And that, Kakashi thought to himself, was the best you could ask of a rookie a few months out of the academy. Good though the ninja academy was, it had the same limitations as any school. Namely, its curriculum lacked that touch of practical experience that differentiated the warriors from the wannabes. But that was okay. So long as the real training, the one given on the job, was good, the theoretical lessons imparted to the students in the academy would be a stepping stone rather than a crutch. And Kakashi had seen and experienced the results of his training regimen. So, as he prepared to kawarimi when the bad guys sprung the inevitable ambush, Kakashi allowed himself a little giggle. He really wanted to do an evil chuckle as he'd read so many villains do in his precious Ika Ika. It fit the state of his mind better, but a chuckle doesn't quite fit the description of a porn-reading, oblivious pervert as a giggle. And Hatake Kakashi, Jounin mentor of Team 7, former commander of the Hokage's own personal assassin corps, was always particular about staying in character. The not-so-bright and not-very resourceful ambushers sprung the trap seconds after Kakashi stepped over the puddle. That was about the only thing they did right through the whole exercise. They went after Kakashi first, the other thing they did right, but the fools must have actually believed that they could take out a Jounin with such an obvious trap. Even sadder, they didn't even bother to check if he was really dead before they went after Team 7. To quote Kakashi from the report he submitted to the office of the Hokage, the poor fools must have been in a hurry and may have been driven by an urgent need to attend the call of nature. It was established official Kakashi speech for, they were a bunch of blundering incompetents who couldn't be bothered with taking the most basic precautions. Naruto reacted admirably with instinctive use of deadly force that would have done any veteran proud. Problem was he wasn't a veteran killer. Yet. He had the instincts of one thanks to Kakashi's training, all three members of Team 7 did, in fact, but the psychological shock of the first kill was always a hard one unless you are a sociopath, which the Jounin had long since concluded Naruto was not. Reaching for his thigh holster, Naruto drew shuriken and threw them at the nearest of the two attackers even as they turned their attention to him. As per Kakashi's lessons, he did not aim for the target itself, but rather used the shuriken as an area denial weapon, restricting his opponent's freedom to maneuver. His prey thus trapped, he blurred out of sight. Charging low even as his opponent countercharged with his partner, Naruto pulled a kunai and held it crudely in his hands in a grip that could not be used for anything other than to punch-stab. With but 10 feet to go, he bent his left hand and used it to brace his right and with a massive burst of chakra, launched himself at his opponent's throat, literally vanishing from sight as he did. Such a bloody-minded attack from a genin would have caught anyone by surprise. Even Kakashi had almost fallen for it the first time Naruto went for his throat, but where the Jounin had reacted on pure instinct and broken the Uzumaki's arms and jaw, the enemy nin failed to even complete a block with his wrist guard. Naruto crashed into his assailant hard, his impromptu punch dagger taking the masked attacker in his throat with a sick squelching sound that heralded the rookie's first kill. The force of the impact sent both pin-wheeling away with Naruto's opponent flopping the way only a dead body can. Meizu, the surviving nin, cried out, even as Naruto and his victim rolled away. The assailant skidded to a halt, turned towards them and let out a blood-curdling scream that cut off abruptly as Sakura kuni-whipped him. That went better than expected, Kakashi observed, appearing before them with his porn clutched lovingly in his hands. He flipped a page and shot his patented blinding smile, which unfortunately, was really not all that blinding at his students. He turned to Tazuna still sporting that smile, but the humor no longer reached his eyes and the bridge builder knew true fear. Tazuna-san, please explain why 2 Chunin ranked missing nin are after you. As Tazuna narrated his story to the Jounin, Sakura went to Naruto and braced his shoulders as he puked his guts out into the ground right next to his downed opponent. Sasuke, for his part, pulled out the kunai he'd used to pin Meizu's partner to the ground, the reason the man screamed so loudly, and wiped it clean while standing guard over the prisoner. So let me get this straight, Naruto said at the end of Tazuna's speech, you knew there were assassins after you, but because you have neither money nor brains, you decided it would be better to downplay the danger involved and asked for an inadequate escort. At what point did you think that it would be better to take an inexperienced team with you into the afterlife than to die alone, shithead? Naruto did not bother to add how he had been forced to take a life because of the bridge builder's stupidity. It was obvious to everyone who heard his words that the real cause of his anger stemmed from that aspect of the mission rather than the actual lie. But you were able to handle it, Tazuna muttered undiplomatically. Naruto heard the comment and moved to slap the drunk, but Kakashi gripped his shoulder and pulled him back. Restrain yourself, Naruto, the Jounin said in his best command voice. Naruto glared at Tazuna as he stepped back. The bridge builder cringed at the loathing and hatred he saw in the boy's eyes. I apologize for my mistakes. It's just that I saw no other way to survive the journey home. I guess some part of me didn't realize how dangerous this really was, he confessed. I'm sorry you had to kill someone, but the path should be clear now, right? After all, you've dealt with the assassins. There'll be more, Kakashi replied immediately. His words got Team 7's attention like none before. And the ones to come will be more powerful than the Demon Brothers. We might have to face Jounin-level opponents. But Tazuna began before Kakashi interrupted him rudely. Your irresponsible actions have put my whole team in danger. My thanks, the Jounin said with a smile. Team 7 stared flabbergasted, though they knew they really shouldn't be. Their sensei was the sickest bastard to ever walk the earth, after all. The life we've chosen is a hard one, Kakashi told his students solemnly. Death, pain, fear, loathing, hatred, blood, sweat and betrayal are constant companions. Through Tazuna-san's thoughtless actions, you'll endure all these in this mission. As rookies, you shouldn't have to. And with any other team of genin, I would be dead set of heading back to the village right away. But you aren't any team of genin. Still, we're only genin, Sakura growled. We can't fight Jounin. Look at what happens whenever we spar against you. Kakashi sighed mentally. Team 7 had lost for so many times and so badly to him that their sense of self-worth had taken a hit. In the heat of battle, they were superb, but give them time to think and by the time they entered the fight, their heads were filled with fatalistic thoughts. He had known this would be one side effect of his training, but considered it a necessary evil. Battles fought and won on the field under his watchful eyes would teach them the self-confidence to overcome the trauma of all those humiliating defeats. It was one of the reasons why he was glad for this crank that wasn't, though with the resources that Gato had at his disposal, this was going to be one hard pill to swallow. You're my students, he told her, making eye contact with Sasuke, Naruto and Sakura one after the other. You've survived training that ANBU would flinch away from. You're Team 7 and as members of this team, you have the honor of those who came before you to uphold. Heroes such as my teammate Obito, Yondaime-sama, Sandaime-sama and the Sannin. Team 7 does not retreat. Come what may, we go forward and we will get the job done. Kakashi knew he was laying it on a bit thick, but this was a motivational speech and it was okay to stretch truth a fair bit. Sakura looked as if she wanted to say something, but closed her mouth and turned askance towards her teammates. You really mean it? Sasuke asked, catching the questioning glance his pink-haired teammate shot at him. Mean what? That part about the training you gave us. Sasuke, Kakashi said in the sincerest tone Team 7 had heard him use, as a genin, would have died under that regimen. Why did you do it then? Naruto asked. His face had shed none of the paleness from before, but his eyes had lost that haunted look. Because Team 7 has always been the forge for Konoha's leaders. Because all three of you have the potential to be truly great, but mostly, because you made a terrible team in the beginning. There was no trust between the three of you. And no love lost. You would have broken under stress on the field. I couldn't let that happen. Like so many other teams. Like mine. Realization of what Kakashi had done dawned then, and with that realization, Team 7 shed some of the resentment they harbored for their teacher. The Jounin observed the softening in their eyes and smiled behind his mask. This mission was really a godsend. The second ambush happened soon after they landed on the shores of Wave Country. This time, all three genin sensed the tightly suppressed chakra of their opponent at about the same time as Kakashi. The rabbit decoy the hidden assassin used when he realized his prey were onto him fooled no one, and quickly, Tazuna was pushed into the center while his protectors split into pairs facing the greenery both sides of the road. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and eyed the undergrowth suspiciously. Now, if he was the one laying the ambush, where would he? Get down, the Jounin shouted, discarding all thought as he sensed a muffled spike of chakra. Sure enough, a massive Zanbato went spinning over their heads. It lodged itself into the trunk of one of the more massive roadside trees, and their opponent finally revealed himself by sunshining atop it. Kakashi groaned internally as he recognized the man. It was Momochi Zabuza, one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. He signed for Team 7 to stay back and took a step forward. Momochi Zabuza, the Hokage, greeted the assassin. The famed Hokage Kakashi of the Sharingan recognizes me. How nice, the masked assassin observed in a droll voice. I wonder if you'd let us walk away from here without a fight. And miss fighting the Kapinin? Only if you leave the drunk behind, Zabuza replied jovially. Sure, if the Konoha Jounin wanted to give up his quarry, he was all for it. I'm afraid that's not possible, Kakashi replied in the same tone, putting himself between their client and his students, and the swordsman assassin. Zabuza held Kakashi's gaze and nodded. He'd thought that his opponent wanted to avoid bloodshed. But apparently, that was an attempt to warn him off. Guess you aren't going to walk away after all, he said, acting obtuse. Let the enemy underestimate his intelligence to their detriment. One of us isn't, Kakashi agreed and slipped into a stance. For the first time since he showed himself, a flicker of anger crossed Zabuza's face. Call him vain, but he was the bloody demon of the mist. He wasn't going to be treated like a third-rate shinobi. You underestimate me, Kakashi. Better unveil your Sharingan or this won't be much of a fight. Be that as it may, I prefer to go without it, Kakashi replied. To Team 7, he gave the only valuable warning he could before the shit hit the fan. Zabuza's a dangerous missing nin skilled in the art of silent assassination. Be on guard. The 3 genin nodded. Zabuza unleashed his killing intent, saturating the air with his bloodlust. It was powerful enough that the genin trio would have gone catatonic even 2 months earlier. Now, after so many close brushes with death, the children had accepted their mortality, and Zabuza's oppressive chakra, while impressive, wasn't powerful enough. Zabuza noted the reaction of Kakashi's students and felt sufficiently intrigued. The three kids must be some genin to shrug off his psychological attack. But he was a man who knew his priorities, and taking down the famous Jounin came first. Zabuza was also a big believer in deception and stealth. Accordingly, as his opening move, he used the Kirigakure to raise an impenetrable screen of mist. Then, he formed several Mizu Bunshin and sent them to draw out Kakashi, leaving the children ripe for the plucking. It succeeded beyond his wildest imagination, too. Kakashi foolishly separated himself from his students to meet Zabuza's first clone when it came at him sword-swinging. The silver-haired Jounin masterfully slipped into the clone's guard and with frightening ease, rammed a kunai into the fake missing nin. The clone fell apart, and too little too late the Konoha nin realized his oversight. His desire to end the fight fast had made him careless, and now, he was too far to protect his team and their client. At the very moment Kakashi realized his error, a second Zabuza appeared within the circle between Tazuna and Team 7 with his Zanbato coiled to strike. The sword swung faster than the human eye could track, and though the genin reacted instantly, it cut right through Sasuke's right hand as he jumped to avoid the cutting blow. The Uchiha lost his balance thanks to the hit and fell on his behind. He remained thus, staring at the stump as bright arterial blood fountained all over for a few seconds before his eyes rolled into his head and he fainted. Meanwhile, Zabuza swung his sword back, catching the Uzumaki on his head with the flat of his blade. There was a sharp clang as metal hit hard, head and head lost rather spectacularly in a spray of blood. The boy hit the ground spinning and lay still, his arms and legs extended at an unnatural angle with a fractured skull. Kakashi reached Zabuza then. The look in his eyes promised murder, and his action stemmed from pure desperation. The injuries inflicted on both Naruto and Sasuke were not instantly fatal, but without immediate medical treatment, Kakashi knew there was no way they could survive the next few hours. Sasuke was a dead man walking, and with such massive blunt force trauma to his head, Naruto may not survive either, even with Kyuubi's help. Problem was Zabuza had decoyed Kakashi again. Sasuke's and Naruto's murderer turned out to be a clone as well. And as Kakashi punctured its lungs with a kunai, a third Zabuza appeared behind Tazuna and knifed the old drunk in his kidney. The bridge builder opened his mouth to scream in agony, but the nature of the injury prevented it. He bled out in seconds and died thus, his mouth frozen in a rictus of agony. The real Zabuza laughed, hidden safely in the surrounding mist as Sakura knifed the one that killed Tazuna. It was as perfect an end to a battle as he'd ever dreamed. Zabuza screamed in agony as the world shattered before his eyes. Kakashi, with his Sharingan unveiled, twisted the kunai he'd struck into the missing nin's right shoulder, the one that the sword wielder was known to favor. "Like you said, demon of the mist," Kakashi whispered into the Momochi's ears, "one of us isn't going to walk away from here. But allow me to correct you, if you will. The last one standing sure as hell isn't going to be you." "Go to hell," Zabuza whispered, his mind aghast at how badly he'd been outsmarted and outmaneuvered by his opponent. He hadn't even moved an inch after he jumped down to greet Kakashi. Leaving the kunai struck in Zabuza's shoulder, Kakashi pulled out another to kill their would-be assassin, but his chakra sense spiked before he could. He jumped back just in time as a single Senbon took Zabuza in the base of his spine. The dangerous missing nin fell dead. A second later, a Kiri Hunter nin appeared over his dead body. With a nod of acknowledgement to Kakashi, both the nin and the corpse vanished in a whirlwind of petals. Kakashi turned to his students, eyes glazed as mild chakra depletion finally got to him. Sharingan for non-Uchiha was a cold-hearted, power-hungry bitch. "And that is why you need to learn counter-genjutsu training," he said to his students, pointedly staring at Naruto. His point made, he sought the nearest tree and collapsed against it. Zabuza, the infamous demon of the mist, was dead. He died not in the heat of battle but of blood loss from an innocuous-looking stab wound and an embolism far away from any battlefield. It had taken the feared assassin painful minutes to die, pain that the demon had to endure because his tool had ultimately proven inadequate to fulfill its sole purpose in life. In the end, Zabuza's death was simply one of the many ignoble fates inflicted so often on soldiers. But as the hunter Nin stared at his blood-stained hands, he felt sadness and loss most profound. This was by far the biggest tragedy in a life full of it, and he was sick and tired of it. The hunter Nin knelt beside the cooling corpse for the longest time in a rage-filled silence, staring at the remnants of the latest cruelty dealt him by fate. Without either family or master, and bereft of purpose and duty, he was now truly alone. Again. It was all because of Konoha Nin. The hunter Nin stood up, his fists clenched by his side. He was as unmindful of the plague of flies come to feast on blood and flesh as he was of the stink of death. His name was Haku, and starting with Gato, the bridge builder and the Konoha team, the world was going to pay for making Zabuza, master, teacher, companion and his sole reason for living die. And when the blood price was paid, he would atone for failing his duty the only way he could. A tool without a master is not a tool at all, after all. The hunter Nin was suspicious, Kakashi explained as Team 7 neared Tazuna's residence. It was evening twilight and normally, the Jounin would have called a halt, but the bridge builder insisted his house was not more than an hour away. And after the events of the day, Kakashi and the genin were all for having a sleeping roof over their head when they went to sleep at night. He should have burnt Zabuza's body on the spot, but he did not. What else was off about the retrieval and the assassination? The Jounin asked his team. The hunter Nin used Senbon, Sakura pointed out. Hunter Nin are given extensive training with all manner of weapons and assassination methods, Naruto pointed out. He had learned that from one of the scrolls that Kakashi gave Sakura and which she lent him in turn. Spoken like a true scholar, Sasuke leered at Naruto. He had read that same scroll and knew that his teammate was quoting ad verbatim. The Uzumaki had started putting on academic airs soon after Kakashi started lending them field manuals and other study material. Naruto glared at the Uchiha. He wasn't going to stand for anyone trying to steal his thunder. "Yuke, you want to shut up or should I go seme on you like you've never been semed before?" he asked. "Seme with a vengeance?" Sakura pondered, tapping her lips aloud with a giggle. "I like it. Can I watch?" Now, no need to get your panties in a bunch," Kakashi said in a placating voice when Sasuke looked like he was going to blow his top at the provocation. Since the face-off with Zabuza, a great deal of the tension between Team 7 and their teacher had vanished. They had started to eye the Jounin as one among them, finally, unlike before, where he was always the enemy. "We were in the middle of a discussion. Let's not stray from it, shall we?" Sasuke grunted gruffly, but turned his attention back to the task at hand. Senbon are lacking as weapons go. It's much harder to kill with them even when you know what you're doing than with other weapons. Precisely, Kakashi agreed. So. Naruto dragged out the word. His very manner hinted at deficient thought processes working overtime to solve the simple puzzle. "What exactly are you implying, sensei?" Sasuke chuckled and Sakura giggled. Hard as Naruto might try to put on fancy airs, truth was, outside of a brawl, he was a simpleton at heart. Things that were obvious to others had to be explained to him carefully and often in great detail. The hunter Nin may be an impostor. Zabuza may not be dead, Kakashi replied, ignoring the byplay. We may face Zabuza again or if not, someone else that Gato will undoubtedly hire to kill Tazuna-san. What Kakashi-sensei said, genius, Sasuke said, taking a dig back at Naruto. Fuck you, Naruto replied hotly. Kakashi stepped in again, this time by physically restraining the blonde. Now, Sasuke, Naruto, he said in a solemn voice. If the boys weren't going to listen, he might as well have some fun with them. I know the two of you are as thick as Yuke and Same, and there's a whole world of booty waiting out there for you. And not just the manly kind. Why, if you'll only let me lend you Ika, which you'll have to return or I'm disembowel you and hang you from the Hokage monument by your entrails, so help me God. I will introduce you to the pleasures of the female flesh. Come, my students, can't you feel the one true way of the pervert call you? Team 7 stared at Kakashi and uniformly took 3 steps away. Sure, they'd been feeling more at ease around the sadistic psychopath after working by his side and really seeing the technician part of him on the field for the first time. They admired his skill and his know-how, but it remained that their mentor was one deranged pervert. Stay away, Kakashi-sensei, Sakura warned. Yeah, what she said, Naruto and Sasuke seconded. Kakashi giggled. But not at them. Having had his fun at his students' expense, his attention was focused on his Ika once again, and he was oblivious to the looks Team 7 were giving him. Beside them, Tazuna looked at the half-empty bottle of sake in his hands. He hadn't heard a word his escort said since the Jounin made that statement about more assassins out for his neck. Finally mastering the shakes triggered by Kakashi's words and by the memory of that half-naked assassin's killing desire, he took a big swig to steady his nerves some. It did not help him in the least. XXXXX it was time. Haku walked into Gato's headquarters in Wave after ensuring that the business magnate was present within its walls. The guards at the front gate waved Zabuza's accomplice through without a second look. They had seen the boy with the masked, sword-wielding murderer before while on Gato's personal security detail and considered him a harmless brat. Since the late Demon of the Mist's appearance was so threatening, people they ran across classified his politely dressed sidekick as blameless. It was a mistake that most had no cause to regret. But not Gato's guards. Not today. Innocent and harmless-looking though he was, Haku was a trained assassin and posed a considerable threat to those around him. The only difference between him and his infamous mentor was that he was not a natural-born cold-blooded killer like his teacher. But today, having lost his master and sole purpose in life, Haku was crazed with anger and loss and was the embodiment of death and destruction. The guards did not know it, but they would not be alive for much longer. Haku started his killing spree with Gato. He waited nearly half an hour before he was permitted to see the business magnate, but that was all right. The late Zabuza had taught him the value of patience while on the hunt. When it was finally time, Haku dutifully followed Gato's secretary into the latter's office. The young assassin's eyes scanned the room as soon as he entered the room. 2 wannabes stood guard behind Gato, but otherwise the man was defenseless. What are you here for? Gato asked disdainfully, reminding Haku that the man was a pig, his pretensions to culture to the contrary. And where's your master? I know the bridge builder got home safe and sound. Hiring. Gato gurgled. A collapsed throat tends to cause difficulties to continued breathing, after all. The 2 wannabes started to react, but by then, the secretary was dead and Haku was in their rear. A second later, they lay dead at his feet. Afterwards, Haku went through the building as cold as efficient as any killer there ever was. Before long, every room was spotted crimson and silence reigned supreme. But not for long. A few minutes later, flames fed by oil and office stationaries reached out into the sky as the lone arsonist walked away into the night silent and unobserved. Tomorrow, the bridge builder and Konoha Nin would pay. Hey, Sasuke, a building's burning in the east. Wooden buildings have a tendency to burn bright when you set them on fire, Naruto, Sasuke replied, without turning towards the Uzumaki. I know, you dumbass. My night vision's gone. I can't see for shit. That is a concern. It leaves us vulnerable. Yep. Think we should wake up Sensei? Let him rest. We'll probably need him tomorrow. And what if someone attacks us tonight, genius? The enemy could have fired that building to degrade our vision for all we know. We deal with it. There's enough open space around the building that they shouldn't catch us by surprise. Still, it'd be best if you'd take my post and I yours. Your eyes are better all around and in this light, I'm mostly blind. Okay. It's not that far away. Maybe half a mile from here at most, Naruto commented as they switched places. So? Why hasn't anyone rung the alarm? This house is in plain sight of the road leading in that general direction. We haven't seen anyone rushing to fight the fire, much less the small army you'd see in Konoha. Sasuke thought about it. It is weird, he agreed. Yeah. We'll find out tomorrow morning. Probably pay the street urchins to scout it out, the raven-haired genin said, cracking his knuckles. Yeah. You noticed the kids, right? I saw the hunger in their eyes, if that's what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. Guess we'll find out tomorrow. Haku slept well that night. As someone who'd lived for years on the run from assassins and who'd also been trained in the art of war, he knew sleep was important. And so, he slept. He woke up at 6 and had a hearty breakfast. After spending another hour in preparation and listening in on the whispered gossip about the fire at Gato's office, he set out for his target, the bridge builder's house at around 9. From the intelligence provided by Gato at the start of the contract and from his own observations, Haku knew that Tazuna set out for work at precisely 8 in the morning every day. From conversations he overheard on the street, he also knew that the news of the fire at Gato's headquarters had spread across Wave Country like wildfire during the night. But the squat despot had managed to so completely terrorize the little island nation during his brief reign that the people were little more than cows. As far as the late Zabuza's apprentice could tell, all the cowards who lived close to the fire had stayed within their homes, quite possibly praying to their gods that Gato not accuse them of setting his property ablaze come sunup. So, while the businessman was dead and burnt to a crisp, the whole of Wave ground to a petrified standstill as everyone waited for the tyrant and his gangs of thugs, rapists, and murderers to descend on them like a pack of wolves on a herd of sheep. This was good news, as a terrorized citizenship would make Haku's job easier. Haku did not go directly to the bridge builder's house, however. Instead, he took a detour to the bridge to scout for information relating to enemy deployment. Sure enough, just as he had calculated, a couple of Konoha nin, his master's murderer was unfortunately one of them, stood guard over Tazuna as he oversaw the few stalwart hands who'd shown up for work that day. That leaves the two boys, Haku thought to himself as he turned away from the bridge and headed towards his final destination. Still, as his steps took him away from the partially complete edifice, a part of Haku that was still capable of emotion felt a little admiration for the bridge builder. He was a patriot and a courageous soul in his own way, perhaps the only one in his country, but the fake hunter nin knew he would not regret killing him. He would not regret killing any of them today, innocent or not. Naruto and Sasuke glared at Inari, the stupid, whiny grandson of the besotted bastard who was their client. For some reason, the brat had refused to leave their side this morning when yesterday night, he couldn't stand to be in the same room as them. Well, they'd finally asked him why and gotten their answer. It was not to their liking. "Listen, you crybaby," Sasuke said, leaning down so that his eyes were level with the little twerp, "I don't care who you are or who you think you are. You repeat those words again in my presence, and I'll tie you up and leave you to rot on an ant nest." "Inari, you come here," Tsunami, Inari's mom, called. Naruto looked at Sasuke and both turned to face her. Sasuke had spoken loud enough that there was doubt she had heard his words. Now, they'd probably have to hear an earful from her as well. Meanwhile, Inari ran over to his mom as fast as his legs could carry him. After sending him into the house with a quiet word, she walked to the genin. "You will not use that tone, those words, or any similar ones with my son again," she told them. "Your son says he's been following us around this morning so that he'll be around to see how we die when Gato comes to kill us," Sasuke replied, meeting her eye and refusing to budge an inch. Tsunami looked distressed. "I'm sorry. My son hasn't been himself since," she paused, pain written in her eyes. To the two genin, it was clear she wanted to avoid that topic. But that does not give you the right to speak to my son in that manner. We'll ignore your son in the future, but tell him to watch his words, Sasuke replied. He wasn't going to back down an inch. The brat deserved whatever was coming to him. Tsunami inclined her head in a slight nod, deciding that was all the concession she was going to get and walked away. You talk down on her, Naruto said in amazement after Tsunami disappeared into the house. It's not that hard. I've seen it done when I was young, Sasuke said, looking away. Naruto nodded and let it be. Some wounds do not heal even with time, and Sasuke's family would be one that'd remain fresh till the day he died. Damned missed, Sasuke muttered after a few seconds of silence. Yeah. And damn Kakashi sensei for leaving a standing guard over the house, Naruto agreed. The day before, Kakashi had allowed Tazuna to convince the need to guard the bridge builder's family as well as the construction workers once the news of the midnight fire reached them. Everyone expected an assassination attempt today, but even Tazuna himself acknowledged that he was the likely target. Still, having no intel on Gato's movements, they could not disregard the possibility of a kidnapping attempt on the bridge builder's family, and Hokage had been forced to concede the fact. As a result, Naruto and Sasuke were stuck with the cushy, boring assignment they so did not want by virtue of having drawn the longer straws. Someone's watching us, Sasuke said all of a sudden. Naruto's forehead burrowed for a few seconds. I sense them. Good job. What do we do? Call them out? And meet them? What if there are two attackers and this one's the bait to draw us out while the other one goes after the family? We can't be strong everywhere, Sasuke, Naruto replied. Quite. So, call them out. I think I will. Sasuke jumped to the side as icicle shards shot towards him and his partner. Naruto jumped the other way and the two ran apart but towards the house, putting distance between them. Tsunami-san, Naruto shouted after coming to rest near the porch. If you can hear me, get your son, but don't leave the house. We're under attack. And don't know by how many attackers. There was a patter of running feet inside the house followed by doors and windows slamming shut. Sasuke and Naruto looked at each other and nodded. Sasuke's Sharingan flared to life. Avoiding another hail of very sharp icicles, they advanced in its general direction running. Weaving and zigzagging to present as unpredictable a target as possible, they split until they were about 50 yards apart before accelerating towards the tree line their opponent was using as a cover in a scissor movement to cut off two possible axes of escape and maneuver. Naruto made the seals for Gokakyu no Jutsu and torched his sector even as he angled towards Sasuke, closely trailing behind his teammate. This left their opponent no choice but to advance towards either of them or retreat. The hidden Nin chose to advance. The unidentified Nin was fast, but Sasuke was equally fast and he had the benefit of the Sharingan. As a result, the actual exchange was short and only a couple of blows had been exchanged before Sasuke got into the Nin's guard and kicked him away. A fraction of a second after the kick connected and the two flew apart, Naruto's kunai shot through where the enemy's previous position. If it had hit the target, which was the unidentified assailant's head, the battle would have ended then, but Sasuke's kick saved the Nin. Where's Zabuza? Sasuke asked, looking their opponent up and down. It was the fake hunter Nin from before and Sasuke had no doubt that Zabuza was nearby. He highly doubted that he and Naruto could hold off both the swordsman and his pet assassin, but hopefully, they'd buy enough time for Tazuna's daughter and her brat to escape. The hunter Nin stood up and tore off his mask. His face was contorted with fury, loss, hatred and a cacophony of other emotions. All of which were negative. Don't you dare speak his name, feckless scum, the boy grated. Zabuza-sama's dead because of you. That's the first wonderful news I've heard all day, Sasuke goaded, flashing his best smile. The fake hunter Nin threw his mask at Sasuke, screaming in fury. As Naruto and Sasuke watched, huge shards of ice formed spontaneously between them and Zabuza's pet without their enemy resorting to any seals, and the temperature in the clearing dropped to near freezing. The shards shot forward as soon as they formed but were intercepted by another of Naruto's fireballs. Sasuke jumped high over the flames, using the fire and steam to screen his movement, and came down on his opponent. He unleashed a bunch of shuriken at the Nin, who jumped to avoid them, and by doing so, inadvertently walked straight into Naruto's fist. The savage punch sent the Nin flying a dozen or so yards, but somehow, he managed to land on his feet. He spit a couple of teeth, glaring at his tormentors. His eyes glazed over and the temperature dropped even further. "I have a bad feeling about this," Naruto muttered. Sasuke had to agree. It was clear that their opponent had a bloodline that had to do with ice and temperature, and they had no intel on him, just as he had none about them. And while they had numerical superiority on their side, Sasuke's Sharingan was not fully awakened and Naruto had no idea how to use his demon, whereas their opponent seemed to have complete control of his bloodline. Quite frankly, they were in over their heads, their initial success notwithstanding, and it looked like they were going to get the shit beaten out of them. The ground began to freeze over from the moisture in the air just then, making footing precarious, and little shards of ice began to form in the air all over the place. Both Sasuke and Naruto knew that their opponent did not have the reserves to keep expending such high amounts of chakra for more than a minute or two before he died of chakra exhaustion. This was the good news. The bad news was that it was very much an open question whether they could survive the next 2 minutes. The shards reached some critical density and exploded faster than the eye could track, sending the two genin scampering apart in radically different directions. Their reasoning was simple: the more they divided their opponent's focus, the better all around for them. The ideal course of action would have been to retreat with all due haste from the suicidal maniac trying very hard to kill them, but since that would expose Tsunami and her son to the tender mercies of the ice wielder, they couldn't do that. The only acceptable choice was to stand their ground and defeat the enemy or die trying. Naruto used his monstrous chakra capacity to full effect, using it to move faster than ever before. He was so fast that as he weaved in and out, advancing slowly but inevitably towards their opponent, Sasuke could not track him even with his Sharingan. Naruto's raven-haired partner, on the other hand, did not have the luxury of chakra reserves that was the envy of gods. But Sasuke had speed, which he'd gained from training with Naruto as well as the daily team exercises, and he had his Sharingan. Granted, his Sharingan wasn't fully developed, but with 3 months of high-speed combat behind him, he was able to evade the innumerable ice shards shooting all around, while blocking the ones he couldn't dodge with his kunai. Still, for all their prowess, neither of the genin could advance to arm's length of their opponent. They did not even come close, in fact. Sasuke was stopped at 10 yards and Naruto at roughly 5. Beyond that, the slippery nature of the ground and the density of the ice shards made it deadly to advance even at the speeds they moved. And then suddenly, after what seemed like an eternity, the rain of ice stopped as their enemy's chakra reserves finally gave and he collapsed, gasping. The boy's knees did not quite hit the ground before Naruto's kunai took him just behind his ears and the spread of shuriken Sasuke threw took him in his shoulders, chest, abdomen and nose. He died without so much as a word and his body twitched as it lay on the ground, bleeding out. The stink of shit was all prevailing as the corpse voided its bowels. Sasuke fell on his knees laughing like a maniac, celebrating their unexpected victory, as did Naruto. They'd cheated death and escaped by a hair's breadth, once again. They were still laughing when Tsunami and Inari dared to finally walk out of the house minutes later. As mother and son waited nervously on the porch, Naruto rose to his feet and walked towards Sasuke. Their eyes met and their faces stretched into the biggest smiles ever. But for completely different reasons. "Hey, Yuke, guess what?" "What? Oh, great genius. You got 3 tomo on both your eyes. Congrats." Sarutobi looked at the report before him and tried to maintain a calm face for the benefit of ANBU officers standing before him. Truth was, he was angrier now than he had ever been in his life. I trust this is trustworthy? ANBU intelligence head, Blackface nodded. As did ANBU torture and interrogation head, Marino Ibiki. We have confirmation from multiple sources, Blackface said. The control we kidnapped from Rice does not know the exact details, but the traffic through his station had increased dramatically in the last few months. We can't be certain about everything he said, but most of it is validated by intelligence section's reports, Ibiki concurred. Sleepers have started becoming active throughout Fire Country. We've traced 15 so far. We're certain to have missed more. Frankly speaking, we had no idea Suna had managed to plant even this many, Blackface added. Sarutobi took a deep puff from his pipe and contemplated the intel they had in hand. But he did not tarry long. The facts spoke for themselves. To think that it had come to this, he muttered. Is anyone else in on this conspiracy? We're certain they're not directly involved. There have been no changes in their readiness status in months, Blackface replied. But we missed Suna, didn't we? The third asked. Oto's the instigator, Hokage-sama. All indicators point towards that possibility. Suna is simply being opportunistic. This, Sarutobi pointed to the document in disgust, is not opportunism. This is foolhardiness. Orochimaru is not to be trusted. I would think history's lessons had taught everyone that. Suna's position is untenable thanks to the daimyo's intransigence, as you well know, Ibiki quipped, playing the devil's advocate. Sarutobi nodded, but he knew who to blame for Suna's current problems. Damn all fool daimyos, the oldster cursed. What shall we do, Hokage-sama? Blackface asked. They want to raid us during the Chunin exams? Both heads nodded. We'll see about that, the Hokage said with narrowed eyes. The fire daimyo needs to be informed of this development. Ibiki, I trust one of your subordinates will be able to handle this. The responsibility lies with intelligence. My people aren't exactly diplomatic, Hokage-sama. You'll go, Sarutobi said, overriding the head interrogator's objection. Immediately. Ibiki nodded. If those were his orders, he would execute them to the best of his ability, whatever his reservations he harbored about his qualifications for his task. What should I convey to the daimyo? Konoha's going snake hunting. Suna? Them, too. Give him a copy of this document and ensure that it's destroyed before your eyes once he's read it. Ibiki nodded. Set up a meeting of the department heads. As of now, this information is SSS classified. The council is not to know. Yes, Hokage-sama. Dismissed. After the two officers left, Sarutobi secured the document in his locker and moved to the window. He contemplated the Hokage monument and the way of life they'd preached and imbibed into Konoha's soul. He remembered the numerous heroes of the past and present who'd sacrificed their lives for the village. He followed with his eyes the people on the streets below as they tackled everyday problems and carried on with their lives. Then, he considered all that he'd learnt from the report and ever so slowly, prepared his aged heart once again for war. He had known for a long while that he'd made a horrible mistake all those years ago by permitting Orochimaru to live. The chance was at hand at last to atone for the sins of that day, and he would take it. He would teach the elemental nations that Konoha caught unawares was one thing, but Konoha prepared was a completely different proposition, as the shinobi wars of an earlier era had proved. He would bring down that stupid, overreaching snake and pissant, and his upstart village with him. There would no mistakes or lapses in judgment this time around, and Orochimaru was going to fry. Sarutobi, Lord Watanabe, the daimyo's closest confidant, began after the pleasantries had been exchanged. It would be best to have one of your advisors with us for this meeting. The third quietly rang the bell and asked his aide to call for Jounin Narashikaku. Officially, Lord Watanabe was in Konoha to show the flag, but the hasty nature of the unscheduled visit days after Ibiki's return from the capital meant that the stated reason to the contrary, he was in Hidden Leaf to discuss the threat posed by Suna and Oto. Furthermore, the hand-delivered missive from the daimyo delivered by Watanabe in the morning addressed the issue, confirming the Hokage's suspicions. Consequently, the third had wasted no time asking Konoha's resident expert on politics to clear his calendar for the day. The daimyo is concerned about the raid, Watanabe said without prelude once Sarutobi introduced Shikaku. Damage would have been considerable had we remained unaware of the enemy's machinations for much longer. But we wised up to the conspiracy in time and we can prepare properly. Please inform the daimyo that I have every confidence that Konoha will respond in an appropriate manner, the Hokage replied. Lord Watanabe nodded. That is good. The daimyo will be pleased. He will, of course, leave the execution of the plan to you, but he requests that Konoha not exercise the first strike option. Certainly, it makes more sense to launch a preemptive strike if the daimyo's concerned about damage to Konoha's infrastructure and wishes to minimize losses to his ninja corps, Shikaku asked. Watanabe shot the Jounin a glance that said he knew that the Nara was trying to fish for information and found such attempts unnecessary. He was in Konoha for that very reason, after all. It would, he replied. But the daimyo has in mind, shall we say, bigger fish to fry. He does not wish Konoha and Fire Country to be seen as the aggressors at this juncture. Ah! Shikaku muttered. The great game. Yes, Sarutobi nodded. To the Lord, what does the daimyo wish? Only the impossible, of course, Watanabe replied with a wry smile. The daimyo would that Konoha make Orochimaru and his allies believe that we remain unaware of his plans. The actual raid must be crushed however, with minimal loss to the ninja corps. That is a tall task, indeed, Sarutobi acknowledged gravely. To lay a trap on the scale needed to crush a raiding force of over 1,000 and conceal it would be all but impossible if the enemy were a fool. Against someone like Orochimaru, it required an act of God. But it must be done, the daimyo's emissary and confidant insisted. Why? Sarutobi asked. I'm being asked to put the village, the civilians, and my soldiers at risk. What purpose is served by this? Watanabe shot Shikaku a glance. They were now infringing on some very sensitive information and the less people knew, the better for all concerned. You may rest assured, Lord Watanabe, that Jounin Shikaku has my complete confidence. Yes, of course, the Lord replied, shooting an apologetic smile at the Nara. Still, he hesitated a moment as he weighed the risks involved. What I say now is not to leave this room. There'll be war within the week if other countries were to learn of this. We understand, Sarutobi replied. Watanabe nodded and cleared his throat. As you know, T Country supplies Fire Country with 70% of our coal. The coal imports are of the highest quality and our steel industry is almost completely reliant on them. T Country also has the strongest navy in the land. Their navy is much stronger than ours, in fact, and they have forced many concessions from us in the past using their naval power as a bargaining chip. However, despite the trade, the common border we share, and the strategic synergies to be had, T Country has been very recalcitrant towards forging closer relations with Fire Country. They have, in fact, consistently refused any overture for an alliance in the military and political arena. T Country continues to maintain close relationships with our enemies, moreover. Their intransigence, the lurking threat posed by their navy, and their friendship with belligerent foreign powers has thwarted our political objectives and stayed our hand for the longest time. We're aware of this, Sarutobi replied, looking slightly mystified as to where Watanabe was going with his lecture. Everyone in Konoha of Jounin rank and above knew about Fire's less than perfect relationship with their neighbor. 1/6 of all Shrank missions were infiltration or assassination missions within T Country at the daimyo's behest, after all. Shikaku made the logical leap that the Hokage's shrewd mind refused to for some reason, however, and his eyes widened fractionally. It was a testament to the Jounin's self-control that his reaction was so subdued to the thought that crossed his mind. Surely we aren't. Watanabe smiled. Surely, we are. The report on the Oto-Suna conspiracy said that a battalion of Oto-nin, the majority of their forces for the attack, would be smuggled through Tea country. It said maybe, Sarutobi corrected pedantically. The Hokage's demeanor screamed that he grasped what Watanabe had left unspoken so far and was not in the slightest amused by it. He seemed rather angry, in fact. Watanabe did not reply to Sarutobi's rebuttal as well as his sudden change in manner, but Lord and Kage eyed each other, judging each other anew. Jounin Shikaku, would you please excuse us for a moment, the daimyo's representative requested without breaking eye contact with Sarutobi. The Nara quietly stood up and walked outside, locking the door behind him as he did. Good, now we can speak frankly, Watanabe continued, after the door clicked shut. Old friend, I know what you're thinking. You're under the mistaken belief this will not come to pass. But you are wrong. It will come to pass. In fact, it must come to pass. And at a time and place of our choosing. You've read the same intelligence reports as I, and so you know that I speak the truth. This is without question the reason why I'm having a hard time reconciling your conduct now with the comrade who I fought beside so many years back. So, answer me this, have you become so big a fool in your old age as to ignore truth when it stares at you in your face? The Hokage was silent for a moment as he framed a fitting reply of his own. Do you deny that this war you plan is a land-grabbing operation driven by greed? He retorted confidently. Do you think me grown so senile that I would be swayed by your arguments without pausing to part the veil of illusion and see the truth hidden within? It is precisely because I have read the reports that I consider this warmongering. In answer to both your questions, I do not, Watanabe agreed in a solemn voice. But you disappoint me. I expected you to be pragmatic, and the visage I see before me is everything but. As to your final statement, I will reply to it with a question of my own. Do you deny that we face war a decade down the line? No, I do not. Then would you rather we fight a war on two fronts with enemies at our front and on our rear? Does it not make sense to deal with one enemy at a time and defeat them in detail rather than fall prey to two enemies at once? We're simply precluding the latter possibility with this invasion. You aren't giving peace a chance, Sarutobi pointed out. Surely you jest. Or have you grown senile in your old age? No wonder the other villages gaily call Konoha a nation of tree huggers. Under your rule, I should expect the villagers to hug trees myself, Watanabe accused in a scathing voice. Then, in a reconciliatory tone, he asked, forgive my tone and poor choice of words, Sarutobi, but I'm having a hard time understanding the new you. What happened to the man who went by the motto prepare for the worst and hope for the best? What happened to the master politician who could outdo the best of them? What happened to the brilliant and ruthless general who did his duty by his people no matter the cost to protect them from harm? He grew old. He is tired. He has seen too much bloodshed and lived through too many wars, the third replied softly. Watanabe's eyes softened. Death is lighter than the feather. Duty is heavier than the mountain, he spoke kindly. The Hokage sighed. He'd thought himself mentally prepared for war, but it looked like Orochimaru's re-emergence had affected him a whole lot more than he thought. But then, that was to be expected. He'd looked upon the boy as a son once as he had the other two Sannin and had his love repaid with treachery. Betrayal by one's loved ones is never easy to deal with. Never more so than when you are old and with 1 foot more or less in the grave. In this, you have no choice, old friend, Watanabe continued in a softer tone. This is a direct order from the daimyo. In this, he won't be hindered. Refuse and he will make life unpleasant for you and for Konoha. Sarutobi was silent in contemplation for the longest minute. Now that he knew the cause of his obstinacy, he could work with it to make decisions. The choice was obvious, but as Watanabe had said, the Hokage was a canny politician. That part of his mind sensed there were advantages to be had here, and damned he would be if he missed a chance to milk the situation for all it was worth. Very well. Tell the daimyo that it'll be as he wishes. He can have his war and I'll be his sword. In return, he has to promise me that he'll support my choice for successor. Sarutobi, be realistic. A person in the daimyo's position cannot make such a commitment. Not on such a sensitive issue as this. I have to have his support, Seijiro. Covert will do, but I'm not averse to a little overt show of arms either. Watanabe raised an eyebrow. It's that bad? It really wasn't, but you never could be sure when that last erg of influence can help turn the tide and win a battle. Especially since Danzo's star was on the rise and he'd been gaining prominence for some time. And while Sarutobi had nothing against the crippled Exnen, he knew the man was a disaster in the making and could not be allowed to gain the Hokage seat. Danzo. The Hokage's one word said it all to Watanabe. That old war hawk, he asked, his eyebrows narrowing in concern. Danzo was loyal to the village and the country, but he was a direct man not given to subtlety, not to mention, a warmonger. He believed in peace, but with Konoha and Hai no Kuni dictating the terms. That wasn't necessarily bad given that the daimyo wanted a war himself, but while Danzo was as brilliant as any tactician that ever walked the earth, his brilliance did not extend to politics and governance. He would win the battles on the field, run his nation into the ground simultaneously, and ultimately lose the war. Not exactly what one wanted in a leader. Yes. He has wormed his way into the hearts of the council, has he? How? Most of the honorable civilian councillors are attracted to him like a moth to flame. He promises them more power in the running of the village. They would, the poor fools. I assume he has no plans to share power? Sarutobi shrugged. Danzo was far more likely to execute the sycophants once they'd served his purpose than to share power with them. The man had a mindset that was best suited for the battlefield and was quite averse to the idea of power vested in incompetence. He had summarily executed samurai officers from noble clans close to the daimyo in the wars of a previous era without regard for the political fallout for that same reason. Very well. I'll try to pull what strings I can with the daimyo. But no promises. You get me his word that he'll support me. It needn't be a promise. But I want a guarantee that if things were to happen that would portray Danzo in a less than flattering manner, I would get unequivocal support from the daimyo to replace the old coot. Watanabe chuckled. Sarutobi must be very irked with his fellow nin to call him thus. That, I can do. But not if your opponents are as strongly entrenched as your words indicate. The daimyo will only intervene in your favor if there's no clear winner in this political battle. This is acceptable. NT country? Konoha will not launch a preemptive strike. It would help if you were present at the Council of War and state clearly that the daimyo does not want to risk war with earth or lightning. I can do that. That's settled then. Yes. By the way, the daimyo wants you to lead the ninja detachment on the field during the invasion. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Sarutobi replied, especially since he planned on doing it anyways. After all, what better method to catch someone like Danzo than to let him think the nest was empty and he could come home to roost? I'll call in Shikaku, the Hokage added, almost as an afterthought. One look at the inside of the house had the three genin puking their guts on the floor. Kakashi was made of sterner stuff, however. He had seen worse. Though not by much, and even then only because of the scales involved, during his childhood war. He walked into the room and grabbed the lone survivor, a boy who could not be older than 7 years old, with the 1,000-yard stare. The kid did not so much as move a muscle when the jounin lifted him. Perhaps the cruelest thing the killers had done was leave the boy alive to live a sick life that wasn't, Kakashi knew. Just like Itachi had, a thought came unbidden into his mind as his eyes roved the bloody mess inside. "Naruto," he said, handing the child over to the blonde genin, "take the boy outside. Put Sasuke on guard and have Sakura do what she can for him." Naruto took one last look at the room as he walked out, memorizing the horrifying vision inside. His eyes glittered with cold fury at the butchers who'd done this, and he looked ready to kill, which was not far from how Kakashi felt himself. "Tazuna-san," Kakashi said after exiting the poor family's house, making way to the bridge builder, "I want you to take charge here. Organize them as you will, but start forming neighborhood defense squads with able-bodied men." "As you can see," Tazuna replied, waving his hands at the dozen or so men who stood seething nearby, "we're fresh out of brave men." Tazuna had a point, even a good one, Kakashi had to admit. The erstwhile goons of the late Gato, they had finally discovered his fully cooked, decapitated head tucked into a badly deformed metal cabinet, had committed the atrocity in a densely populated neighborhood with hundreds of families. With such numbers on their side, one would have thought they'd sent the murderers packing, but everyone had stayed hidden behind closed doors while a whole family was murdered in cold blood, and even now, only a few dared show their faces outside. The Jounin understood their behavior was the natural outcome of Gato's rule of terror, even if he had never been so disgusted in his life. "You're brave and so are these men," Kakashi replied. He pointed at one of the bystanders as an example. "Look at the fire in those eyes. Can't you see the thirst for vengeance and justice there?" The men moved forward, hearing Kakashi's words. "Find more like them, Tazuna-san," the Jounin continued fervently, "there are always men like these. And if you find none, flee this blighted land. Wave country does not deserve to exist otherwise." Tazuna nodded and left with the men. Kakashi looked them walk away with purpose in their steps and knew there was hope yet for the people of Wave. He turned to his students to find both Sasuke and Naruto looking expectantly at him. "Sakura, take the boy to Tazuna-san's house. See if you can find out if the boy has any surviving relatives," he said. The Jounin knew he did not want to leave the damaged kid with any surviving relatives, but it never hurt to find out what his connections were before he taking him back to Konoha. Sakura nodded but made no move to obey. Kakashi knew that if the traumatized kid wasn't around, she'd be staring a hole into her teacher, following the example set by her teammates. "Naruto, Sasuke, I want you to scout the neighborhood. Find out if anyone saw anything." The spineless bastards witnessed it. "All right," Sasuke replied, gritting his teeth. The scene inside the house had brought back memories of that fateful night when his brother massacred the Uchiha clan. Only where his inhumanly powerful and very insane brother had been an unstoppable juggernaut, the butchers who'd done this were nothing more than weak scum. If the people in the neighborhood had banded together, the killers would have fled, but no one had. As a direct consequence of their cowardice, a third family had paid the price in as many nights. Kakashi did not say anything in reply. This was neither the place nor the time to lecture one's students, and Sasuke wouldn't listen anyway. Not on this subject, at least. Not that the Jounin faulted him for being the way he was. Itachi's hands had shaped the boy's personality, and his foulness would forever taint it. Once you've interviewed any witness who willingly comes forward, you will advance on the camp the bandits have built on the outskirts of the town. You will report to me the layout of the camp, the number of men in it, the security, and other relevant observations this evening at Tazuna-san's house at 6 p.m. sharp. What are you going to do? Naruto asked. We're going to teach the murderers a lesson in terror. Now, leave me. I have to take care of certain things. I received word yesterday that Konoha would be dispatching an ANBU squad to deal with the law and order situation here in a more permanent manner. It'll be at least 2 more days before they arrive here, however. They're responding to a message I sent nearly a week back on the day Gato died, and the situation wasn't this bad then, Kakashi explained once Naruto completed his verbal report on the bandit camp. Does that mean we'll do nothing but scout and gather intelligence? Sakura asked. Sasuke stopped whetting his blade and glared at Kakashi, daring him to agree with Sakura. The Jounin shot the raven-haired genin a cheeky smile in return. No. We won't wait that long, Kakashi replied. True, there were long-term gains to be had by securing Wave's goodwill towards Konoha, but the Jounin felt the same way his students did about the murders. It was good then that both political goals and his personal feelings were aligned this once. They rarely were in the life of a shinobi. That got the attention of all three genin. The plan is to terrorize these feckless vermin. We will remind them that what goes around comes around. The three predatory smiles that blossomed on the faces of his genin was all that Kakashi needed to see. Clearing his throat, he gave them explicit instructions about what he wanted done, underscoring that he did not expect the boys to carry out the last part of the plan alone by themselves. He assured all three of his genin that they were not ready for the task that lay ahead yet, most shinobi never were, and left them alone to prepare for the hunt. You sure you want to do this, Yuke? Naruto whispered. We can take turns, you know. It was 2 hours past midnight, and Naruto and Sasuke were hidden behind a tree some yards from the bandit camp. The rogues hadn't ventured into town tonight, probably because most of them had gotten stinking drunk and could not stand on their feet. If they had known they were being hunted, they would have been less lackadaisical about security, but they did not, and Team 7 were about to make them pay for it. It would bother you to kill these bastards in cold blood, Sasuke pointed out. Not that much, Naruto replied, remembering the dismembered corpses and naked rape victims strangled to death or killed in any number of equally gruesome ways. You can desecrate the corpses? Naruto did not answer. He did not have to. Sasuke knew perfectly well that the blonde would not. But Sasuke could, thanks to his brother's parting curse and lesson. I guess I'll stand watch while you get your jollies. More like a duty that I'll relish, Sasuke replied without any vehemence and turned his attention back to the camp. Soon, the hunt would begin, and come sunrise, yesterday's predators would learn they are today's prey. Danzo, Sarutobi said, greeting the one-armed veteran with a single nod. Danzo entered the Hokage's house without a word, followed by Koharu and Hamura. The village, Sarutobi began once everyone was seated, is once again at dangerous crossroads. We wouldn't be in this predicament if you hadn't allowed his escape, Hamura accused. But he didn't, and we are, Danzo noted. The past is behind us and the future ahead. The present confronts us now. Will you do what needs to be done this time, Sarutobi? The Hokage grimaced inwardly. Frankly, the night he let Orochimaru escape was not exactly his greatest moment, and the room's other three occupants had never forgiven him for letting the traitor go because of fatherly love. I've learned my lesson, the third said, honestly and truthfully. Two of his opponents today were as politically experienced as he was, if not as savvy, and the third just knew him. Sarutobi understood it would not do to lie to this crowd because they would catch him even before the sentence was completely out of his mouth. But there are many ways to catch fish, and he knew just the lure for this bunch. Preemptive strike? Danzo asked, taking Sarutobi's word to mean the end of discussion on that topic. The Hokage shook his head. The daimyo doesn't wish it. Any ulterior motives? War. Ah, exclaimed all three elders at once. Can't be rice country. Too close to earth and lightning, Koharu mused. If not the latest thorn in our side, then an older one, Hamura appended thoughtfully. NT country is the biggest small nuisance of them all. Poses the greatest threat to our economy with their navy in the long run and their lightning allies, too, Danzo added. The three looked at the Hokage questioningly, and he nodded in agreement. But what pretext are we going to use? Hamura asked. Aiding and abetting the enemy. My prodigal student's plans to smuggle his men through T country will be our excuse. It'll have to be after the fact, Danzo commented, frowning in deep thought. Lightning will not accept anything else. Yes, but that's all for the future. The most pressing question is how best do we turn the raid into a trap? Hamura asked. And what kind of trap would best serve our long-term interests? It's something to think on, anyways. Nara Shikaku is already working on the task of activating and training the reserves for the Chunin exams and after. In the meanwhile, I wanted to work on tentative tasking plans for the invasion force. I know we are supposed to leave this to our subordinates after giving them due direction, but the plans must be made in utmost secrecy. This is why I called you three today, Sarutobi said, eyeing his three fellows. Koharu sighed and stood up to fetch some tea. It was going to be a long night. Early next morning, as Sarutobi was seeing the three of them out, Danzo paused at the threshold and turned to his sometimes ally and oft-times opponent. You better see about bringing your other wayward student back to the village. If there's to be a war, who knows how many lives her medical knowledge will save. I would if I knew where she was, Sarutobi replied, regretfully. Give me a couple of weeks. I'll find her for you. The Hokage nodded. As Danzo walked away, Sarutobi reflected back to his plans for the man and shook his head. For all that the crippled ex-nin managed to irk him and the two of them were more often at odds on the political arena than not, the Hokage personally liked the old cripple. Two bad circumstances had pitted them against each other because of their opposing philosophies. The third consoled himself with the thought that sometimes, sacrifices had to be made of even the best stock for the greater good. Danzo with his head full of unrealistic nonsense would surely lead the village to damnation if he were not stopped, and there was only one to stop someone as determined as him. He called himself Katana Katsumoto. He was one of few expert swordsmen in Gato's coterie of mercenaries, but his real claim to fame was sadism, rape, torture and murder, any of which he could do at the drop of a hat. The men knew he was an old hand and respected him for his ruthlessness as well as experience. They acknowledged his fearlessness in the face of danger and accorded him the same treatment as any of the more dangerous men in the camp. Some of them even called him boss. But while he was all the above, Katsumoto was also an early riser. So, when Katsumoto screamed himself hoarse after waking to the sight of an exsanguinated and very decapitated head whose eyes bereft of eyelids seemed to look right into his soul, he awoke the whole camp. In other tents as well, men woke to find 9 more of their neighbors slaughtered pitilessly in their sleep. Terror and panic spread through the ranks of the murderous thugs like wildfire. Thus did Gato's survivors learn that the hunt was on and they were no longer the top predators in the neighborhood. The sealed orders and fake mission requests for the week leading up to the finals are done, Blackface reported. Sarutobi nodded and laid down his quill. Please, sit down, he said. The ANBU commander took his seat. ANBU squad and individual training for their missions are done, Blackface continued. Cooperation from Root has been extraordinary. We've established communication protocols, and our people and theirs have trained extensively on interoperability. That's good. We're actually ahead of schedule on that front then. Yes, Hokage-sama. But I have reservations about keeping the regular shinobi regiments so completely in the dark. I understand some of the members are under suspicion of being compromised as well as the overriding need for secrecy, but this policy is going to have an adverse impact on our state of readiness. That, the third dragged out, cannot be helped. Surprise and secrecy are paramount to our plan. Strategic surprise certainly is, even more so than tactical element or overall effectiveness. Are we prepared for the casualties that the plainclothes will suffer? Blackface asked, using the ANBU name for the regulars. Considering the strategic objectives, shouldn't we be more sensitive to troop losses? This is the best that we can do within the boundaries imposed on us from within and without. Unless you have something new to contribute, the Hokage said, shooting an expectant gaze at the department head. We can assign the Chunin and Genin teams to civilian evacuation. The Jounin can serve as the mobile security force as well as strategic reserve during the raid. Sarutobi leaned forward looking slightly interested. It'll free up ANBU squads assigned to the evacuation for offensive operations, Blackface added, sensing victory in his grasp. Sarutobi closed his eyes and thought it over. When he opened them, he had that look about him that said he had made his decision and would brook no further discussion on the matter. The Hokage's face was so stern that Blackface thought his suggestion was about to be rejected. We can always rewrite the SOP for evacuation and make the process work for us. It's overdue for a review, anyways, Sarutobi said, relaxing with a wry smile and a nod of acknowledgement to the ANBU commander. All right. This is what we'll do. You know, I think this is going to be a cinch, she said once they entered the exam hall, her eyes focused on all the genin gathered there. As if that was ever in doubt, Naruto replied, cracking his neck. The idea is to not attract attention, Sasuke muttered as he walked by his preening teammates. Sakura pouted and Naruto shook his head, but they followed the Uchiha to the lone unoccupied corner of the room to the left of the entrance. Screw you, mister, I've got a stake up my ass. Why do you have to cramp everyone's style? Naruto said to his raven-haired teammate in a grumpy voice, leaning against the wall like Sasuke and Sakura so that he was facing the mass of genin. Sasuke made to reply but noting Team 10 and 8 approaching their corner, kept his peace. We're about to have company. It's only the pooch and his team, and the bitch and hers, Naruto said with a grin as he crossed his arms. Ino, who was near enough to overhear Naruto's comment, glared at the blonde. I heard that, jerk face. Really? Naruto replied, faking surprise. And here I was thinking you were deaf. Fuck you, Ino said rather vehemently. Sasuke's teammate or no, she was not going to suffer some prick calling her a bitch in silence. If it was war the blonde bastard wanted, she would give him one. Naruto, shut up, Sakura said, taking control of the conversation before it devolved into a fight. What do you want, Ino? I came to see my Sasuke-kun, Ino replied. It's been so long since I've seen him. Not long enough for me, Sasuke said offhandedly. Naruto chuckled. So, what have you guys been up to? He asked the others. Training and missions, Kiba replied in everyone's stead. I bet I can kick your ass now. Naruto snorted and made to reply but citing a new arrival, controlled himself. And who are you? He asked the spectacle-wearing older genin sporting a Konoha headband. The new arrival smiled disarmingly. I'm Yakushi Kabuto. I came to give you guys some advice. Naruto scratched his head at the name. Are we supposed to know you? No, Kabuto replied, but I've attended these exams several times before and there are a lot of dangerous folks here. You would do better to not attract attention to yourselves. Sasuke chuckled at the words. Must be a veteran loser then, he said in a patronizing voice laced with disgust. Team 7 doesn't need your advice. Now go over to your little corner and keep a lookout for the dangerous kids. They might hurt you. I can help you, Kabuto replied, his friendly smile fading a little. I have collected information on all the examinees and am prepared to share them with you since we're all from the same village. You'll share information just like that? Naruto asked, suspiciously. It was either that this Kabuto was an incompetent or he had a hidden agenda. In both cases, especially in the latter, Naruto was sure he did not want Team 7 to be involved with him. And apparently, so did Sasuke. We don't want your information, Sasuke gritted out, get lost. Wait a minute, Kabuto-san, Sakura interrupted. She shot a glance at her teammates that quelled the protests forming in their lips. You say that you have information on everyone gathered here? That's correct. Tell us about yourself then. Myself? Yes. Your strengths and weaknesses. Things like that. Kabuto smiled and spread his arms. Surely, you don't want to know about me, he said affably. But we do, Sakura replied. We want to know why you'd failed the Chunin exams several times before. I fail to see how that is pertinent to this conversation, Kabuto answered, the friendly smile plastered on his face fading a little. You're our opponent, Kabuto-san, Sakura pointed out. We were taught that you learn more from failures than from success. None of the other teams have approached any of us offering help, Shikamaru added, eyeing the elder genin curiously. Now that Sakura had drawn attention to the discrepancies, his suspicions were aroused as well. Why on earth would anyone taking part in the exam want to help others when every little advantage you and your team had in your hands could mean the difference between pass or fail? Are you setting yourself up to fail the exam? No, Kabuto answered, slowly. He was supposed to awe the genin with his knowledge and gain their confidence, but Team 7 had derailed his plans. The other genin were nothing special and he could have fooled them any time he wanted, though as expected, the Nara was smart as all hell. But brains did not mean anything if you were too lazy to use it most of the time and the other genin weren't really his target. His quarry was the Uchiha heir, but it looked like Kakashi had trained his team too well to be had by so shallow a trap. But you will if you share information about yourself, Sakura pointed out. Obviously, I can't tell you information about myself. Then you'll share information about the other genin examinees. Precisely. But we don't know anyone, Shikamaru mused. Why don't you tell us who we should watch out for? And throw in their strengths and weaknesses for good measure. The easiest way out of this mess would have been to share the information Shikamaru asked, but Kabuto knew that would only have landed him in another one. To give the Nara and the gathered genin the answer was to undermine his own team in the exams, which would have raised some rather unwanted questions. So, he kept quiet. I thought so. You aren't here to help us but to undermine us, Sasuke accused aloud, breaking the silence after it dragged for several seconds. We don't want you around. Get lost. And Kabuto did. His mission was a failure, but that was okay. He was sure Team 7 would pass the written test and there was no avoiding the trap in the forest of death. The woman watched the third ship of the day set sail from the harbor and made a mental note of it. Filing away the information, she turned away from the window and turned to stare at the middle-aged soldier sleeping naked on her bed. She had targeted him for months now and only the night before allowing him to seduce her, she had confirmed that he was one of the senior officers of the naval base's security detachment. That was good. She had more than a month to work her magic on him and he would be putty in her hands long before that. And when the time came, she would do her part and he would become an instrument of T-Country's undoing. Naval power is useless when the ships are moored on port and on land, after all. Team 7 did not sense the Kusa Nin until the latter revealed herself to them. It was enough to give them pause. In the 2 months since the mission to Wave, all 3 genin had improved by leaps and bounds. They had learnt that it took talent. Kakashi could do it 7 times out of 10, for example, to fool them on the field. Who are you? Sakura asked, even as she moved wide to take the Kusa Nin on her left flank. Sasuke followed his teammates' lead by moving to take the genin from her right, leaving Naruto to protect the center. The Kusa Nin shot a creepy smile and unleashed a killing intent that was more powerful than anything Team 7 had experienced by at least an order of magnitude. It was testament to the kunoichi's strength that her desire to rend and dismember stopped them in their tracks for several seconds, something that none of their opponents had managed on the field so far. Clearly, this was no ordinary genin. Can the hunted question the hunter? The kunoichi asked in a voice that was even creepier than her smile. Sakura's grip on her kunai tightened before she willed herself to relax. The worst that could happen here was that she and her teammates would die. But the Kusa Nin's team had to be worried about passing this phase of the exam as well, and it made sense to prey on the weak or the weakened rather than the strong, which Team 7 were. A challenge for your heaven scroll, the Kusa genin continued. She rolled out her tongue, which would have made Naruto's and Sasuke's thoughts take off in another direction any other day, swallowed her earth scroll and said, "You can have mine." If you defeat me. Naruto took a step forward and the kunoichi unleashed a powerful daitapa at him and Sakura, never once taking her eyes off Sasuke. Naruto and Sakura weathered the windblast by holding on to the branches they were perched on with chakra. Lady, with a tongue like that, you can blow me anytime, Naruto shouted once the howling wind died. As inappropriate as the comment was, it was exactly the right thing to say as it informed his teammates that frightening though their opponent was, it was still business as usual. Without any outward signal, Team 7 then jogged forward as one on different vectors that would have them fall upon their opponent in a staggered manner. The Kusa-nin smiled at their tactics and stood her ground. The slight shift in her stance was the only evidence that she even acknowledged Team 7's attack. Naruto reached the kunoichi first. Even as he drove in his first probing strike to test the other genin's defenses. Sasuke jumped high into the air. Paying scant attention, the Kusa-nin blocked the blonde's blow casually, but her training betrayed her. As she defended against Naruto, she looked toward Sasuke, her eyes automatically focusing on his sudden high-speed movement. Their eyes met and she became ensnared in his genjutsu. Almost simultaneously, Sakura unleashed her own genjutsu, much stronger and far harder to break than her attempts less than 6 months back, and the Kusa-nin staggered. At that moment, Naruto's kunai caught her carotids and she dissolved into mud. Naruto spun without a pause, lashing out with a high kick. The Kusa-nin blocked it and punched him away with a hard hit just over his solar plexus that would have shattered his rib cage if he hadn't used a kawarim in time to escape it. Sasuke's Hausenka fried the Kusa-nin as the blonde made his escape, but like his teammate before, the raven-haired genin wasn't fooled. He threw kunai glued with explosive tags at a nearest tree to his left even as the now molten mud clone settled into the ground before him. The explosion shattered the tree trunk, sending splinters everywhere. The tree tumbled as gravity exerted its iron will. The ground shuddered at the crash. Very good, the Kusa-nin said in an amused voice. Before she could continue her speech further, Sakura's thrown kunai took her in her forehead. It's not nice to interrupt one before one's done speaking, a slightly less amused voice whispered into Sakura's ears just before a kick that was powerful enough to crush boulders slammed into her. And your voice is irritating, Sakura replied from behind the kunoichi after ramming her kunai into the base of the latter's skull. The Kusa-nin crumbled into mud again. The real one stepped out from behind a tree, a rueful expression on her face. Her lower part of her left earlobe was a mess and blood dripped into her shoulders. For mere genin to cut me without my intending it. Kakashi has outdone himself, the kunoichi said. Her words gave Team 7 pause. The encounter so far had shown them that the enemy was extraordinarily powerful for a genin. She was possibly on the same level as Kakashi in terms of skill and power, if not higher. And that alone was freaky enough. But to have her talk of their sensei as if she knew him personally. That went beyond weird. In fact, it struck terror in their hearts. A genin from another village, no matter how skilled, could not have known about Kakashi. The only other option was that the kunoichi was in fact an older, higher-ranked nin masquerading as a lowly genin who'd managed to smuggle herself with ease into an exam administered by watchful Chunin and Jounin, and guarded by Anbu. The kind of skill involved in the act was mind-boggling, but the idea that such a shinobi had chosen to target them, and there was no doubt in their minds as soon as they heard the kunoichi's words that they were the sole purpose the Kusa-nin was even in the forest, was at once heart-stopping and exhilarating. Nevermore would Team 7 doubt their place among the best of the best after this battle. The kunoichi grinned, reading the looks pasted on the 3 genin. Let the exam begin in all earnest, she said and moved. The Kusa-nin struck first. Summoning snakes, she sent them at Sasuke and Sakura, and laid into Naruto as if she were the devil herself. The blonde matched the insane pace she set for all of 5 seconds before she launched a punch from an impossible angle. For all his genius at taijutsu, the genin could only goggle at the strike even as the hit connected with the force of a pile driver against his solar plexus. He flew back through the air, and lay gasping and retching on the forest floor after pinwheeling several times. The blow also put him out of the fight for the next minute or so, as the kunoichi had intended. After all, no amount of ungodly healing and determination can help you if you cannot breath. With Naruto on the ground, the Kusa Nin turned to Sasuke and Sakura. They attacked her ferociously, but individually, Team 7 was nowhere near the Kusa Nin in skill. It was only their teamwork that gave them any chance at all, and with one of their own knocked out of the equation, the other two were as bowling pins on a bowling lane. The kunoichi knocked them down at will, shrugging everything they threw as if it were all nothing. Of course, Sasuke and Sakura fought like demons, but their opponent might as well have been a mountain for all the luck they had. Finally, when all hope seemed lost, with both genin on the ground and the Kusa Nin standing over them with a satisfied look on her face, a huge blast of fire struck her from the back. The heat was enough to singe both genin's hair, make their clothes smolder and set the treetops on fire. There was no way that the kunoichi should have anticipated it. It caught Sasuke and Sakura completely by surprise, but anticipate she did, underlining once again how big the gap in skills really was. So, even as the earth clone crumbled before them and Naruto collapsed on his knees gasping for breath, the Kusa Nin stepped out of a tree chuckling, amusement writ on her face. Such determination. Such skill. Such power, she observed rhetorically. To Team 7 in general and Sasuke in particular, she said, "Sasuke-kun, I came to test the power of the Uchiha clan, and truly, your eyes possess greater potential than Itachi's. I shouldn't be surprised that you are every inch the genius they said you are, but your teammates are treasures as well. Too bad I had prepared to apply the seal on only one person." The kunoichi sounded almost wistful as she looked at the three genin. "It'll have to do, I suppose," she said, and her face broke into a wide smile. Paralyzing them again with an even stronger burst of killing intent than before, she elongated her neck and bit Sasuke. The Uchiha stood his ground for several seconds, gritting his teeth to fight the pain. And then fell down with a hiss, clutching the nape of his neck in agony. The Kusa Nin watched him dispassionately as he writhed on the ground and turned to his paralyzed teammates. "Your eyes thirst for power," she told them. "I can give it to you. More than you dreamt possible. If Sasuke survives the bite, he'll bear my mark forever, and it will give him a taste of real power. And when it's time, he'll come to me to gain more. You'll come with him to join me as well, because only I can give you the strength to crush your foes and quench your thirst. I'm Orochimaru, and you three are mine till the end of eternity." I cannot tell you how delighted I was to hear that Orochimaru smuggled himself into the exam, the Hokage said, sounding as if he were discussing the weather. The penultimate round of the Chunin exams had ended less than half an hour earlier. The victorious genin had left to celebrate their success and prepare for the finals to be held a month in the future. The atmosphere among the various ANBU heads and the lone jounin gathered within the hall was very somber, however. Sarutobi had known about Orochimaru's successful infiltration into the Chunin exams for 3 days now. In fact, he hadn't spoken a single word about the embarrassing incident, much to the relief of the ANBU captains. His opening words today told the men and women gathered in the room all they needed to know, however, especially since he, a stickler for proper timings, skipped explanations for the delay in starting the meeting. If they knew the man, and they knew him, the third had used the 3 days to work himself into a royal fury on the subject of his treasonous student. "How?" Sarutobi ground out, "do you imbeciles excuse the breach in security when ANBU are on red alert?" No one answered. Ibiki and Kakashi kept their faces completely immobile without a hint of emotion. The ANBU may or may not have, it was impossible to tell with their masks, but from their rock-steady postures, it was clear that they were as full of trepidation as the bare-faced shinobi were. All the active nin present in the room had known the Hokage in such a frame of mind only once. Right after the attempted kidnapping of Naruto, Sarutobi had called his people together and spoken to them in a similar manner. The Jounin who'd been in charge of security in that sector and whom the Hokage held personally responsible for the attempt had lost his head that day. And the very next, a dozen shinobi and civilians followed with theirs. It was literally life or death now as it had been then, and the men and women in the room knew it. Behind Sarutobi, Hamura and Koharu locked gazes with Danzo and nodded. This was the Sarutobi they knew. This was the cold-blooded, analytical killer and master tactician who'd led Konoha to victories in the wars of a long-gone era. This was the Hokage Konoha needed with carrion eaters sniffing at the door, and finally, they'd got him. There would certainly be no pussyfooting anymore. Let the other villages call Konoha a bunch of tree-huggers henceforth if they dared. What I want done is this, Sarutobi continued on the same vein, outlining the actions he wanted taken. As he spoke, his subordinates visibly relaxed and jotted down points on issues relating to their duties. If heads rolled today, it would only be in the figurative sense, and that was a whole sight better than losing it literally. Kakashi, the third, said once he was done, "You wanted to say something." Kakashi nodded and approached the center of the room. Normally, a Jounin wouldn't be allowed to attend a meeting between ANBU heads and the Hokage, but Hatake had once been an ANBU commander himself. And while he was no longer on the active lists, he maintained close ties with the ANBU community, offering them advice and generally acting as a consultant. Still, even he had been surprised by most of the things today. No wonder that the guards allowed him entry only after consulting their superiors and denied it to someone as trusted as Asuma. So, it took a couple of seconds to organize his thoughts. As you are aware, the Jounin told the ANBU, Sasuke has been given one of Orochimaru's curse seals. What you may not know is that Orochimaru has offered to give succor to Team 7 should they ever become Nuke-Nin. There were a few murmurs at the news. The few ANBU who were in the know kept their counsel to themselves, however. For his part, Kakashi allowed the murmurs to die down naturally before continuing his report. My students and Asumas have brought to our attention suspicious behavior on the part of one of the Konoha genin who participated in it. His name's Yakushi Kabuto. I've looked at his records and that of his team. This is the 6th time this Kabuto had attended the genin exam. His records indicate he advanced to a certain level and then gave up on all 6 of them. There were more murmurs. While it was possible that the genin was a loser without ambition, it was just as likely he failed the exams because advancing further in the ranks would put him under closer scrutiny that would reveal things of an unpleasant nature, like treason. This time, Ibiki and the counterintelligence head, the only 2 people in the room other than the Hokage and his advisors who knew about the information prior to the meeting, kept quiet. Yakushi Kabuto offered to help Konoha genin at the very start of the exams, Kakashi continued. In particular, he approached Team 7 purposefully before he did the others. The murmurs were very excited now. Ibiki stepped forward as Kakashi stepped back. We suspect Kabuto, his team and their sensei are compromised, he said. Unfortunately, we cannot bring them in for questioning. It would raise suspicions in the opposition's camp if we did, and that is something we have to avoid at any cost. But we cannot let Kabuto and his team out of our sights. Too much depends on operational secrecy for the next few months. They will be under observation by ANBU from the Counterintelligence Division, henceforth. The ANBU heads nodded. Sarutobi took center stage again. That is all. May God and will of fire defend the right. It had taken far longer than Danzo anticipated. But that wasn't really a surprise. The Sannin were skilled as only a few in the history of the shinobi world were, and when they did not want to be found, they could not. Luckily for Konoha, Sunade, genius Kunoichi and world's foremost medic Nin had not cared to hide her tracks as her teammates were wont to. If she had, this meeting would not have transpired at all this side of eternity. Excuse me, but have you read The Slug, the Snake and the Toad? the ordinary-looking man in plain clothes asked the well-endowed blonde as he slid into the bar stool next to hers. Tsunade's buzz from her drinks went just like that. What the man spoke was the code phrase to ascertain credentials for whenever some emissary from Konoha wanted to make contact with her. She did not need this today or any other day, for that matter. "Go away," she told the intelligence officer gruffly. Konoha could go and blow a bull's cock for all she cared. "I'm afraid not, mistress. I'm under orders." "I'm sure you understand," the agent said. He ordered a drink quietly, letting her mull over what he'd said and what he might say to ruin her day further. And mull, Tsunade did. She could not leave. Sarutobi had said in no uncertain terms that if she made any attempt to avoid an agent of Konoha, he would declare her a nukenin and send his dogs after her when she left the village. He would let her go if only reluctantly, but she owed the village more than it owed her, and back in those days at the end of the war, her teacher had no qualms about cashing in the IOUs. And if they could not be cashed, the Debtee's head on a platter would do in a pinch. "Fine. Have your say," she said finally when the man took a sip and raised an eyebrow at her. "Very well. The Hokage wishes your presence in the village for the coming Chunin exams." "I would rather not go back to that accursed village," Tsunade said bitterly. She had lost all that had ever mattered to her life in that village. The streets, the favorite haunts. They all held painful memories that she could not abide, and that was why she had left. Sarutobi knew this. Why would he want her to reopen old wounds? Especially when he knew as well as she did that those wounds had never healed. "You do not have a choice, mistress," the man said very politely as he laid down the law. "Konoha has bought your debts. If you refuse, Konoha will call them all in at once." Tsunade glared. How dare the old man do this to her? "And if I do?" With Sarutobi, if there was a stick, there was always a carrot. He wouldn't hesitate to use the stick if it was warranted, but its main purpose was to sweeten the deal for the carrot. "You'll have to ask him yourself. They expect you in the village." "Soonest." The man paid his tab and left the bar as unobtrusively as he must have entered. Tsunade glared at his back till it disappeared and staggered out of the bar after paying hers. Oh, she would hurry all right. She had a few choice words to tell the old monkey, and the sooner she got them off her chest and threw them in his face, the better for all concerned. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.